episode 49. We got a great one. Cody Saftic from the Fight Network. Thanks to our sponsors, Conway Customs and Datsusar. Hello, folks. How are you? Welcome to episode 49 with Kat here at Fight League Atlantic. As mentioned, we got a great one here with Cody Saftic. Long day. Cody Saftic from the Fight Network. Let's bring him in right away. How are you,
What's going on, Kat?
Not too much, man. Sorry about the little mix-up there at the beginning. And my mother, I'm very sorry, a day after Mother's Day to drop the F-bomb. But yeah, not a good start to the day, not a good start to the podcast. But how are you doing, Cody?
I'm doing very good, thanks. Yeah, obviously with tons of UFC getting crammed in the last week or so, there's been a lot of watching fights and prepping for that. But hey, man, I can consider a lot of things worse to do with one's time than sitting back and watching some fights. So I'm glad that there's at least some type of pro sports out there. And whereas there's a lot of baseball fans and football fans and hockey fans who need to watch MMA for the first time, I'm the MMA fan who at least my sport's still going on. So, you know, in that regard, things aren't that bad.
Good. Yeah, it's I don't know how you feel. Well, actually, I'm pretty sure I know how you feel about what happened this weekend. In my opinion, resounding success. What about you?
Well, for sure. I think there's two ways of looking at it. If you're the UFC and clearly they want to have an event without a hitch, no issues, having Jacare test positive, that's that little hiccup for them. And if for whatever reason Jacare's got a couple cornermen and they test positive and Fabricio Verdum ends up testing positive and by next week we've got 4 or 5 tests, well, now it's a little bit different, right? I think that the average test, it takes about a week to come back. So let's say after the fight you get tested. Now, Wednesday, there's another card. You could have some UFC personnel. You could have some athletic commission people who could be sick, maybe not know about it, and are moving around. So I think it's a success. It's an early success. I'm knocking on wood. I would just love to see it go clearly. And I think this is more than just fighting. It's more than sports. It's almost like a political thing as well. You've got a lot of people out there that think we should just reopen and get back to business. You have a lot of people out there who are erring on the side of caution. So the UFC, it's just more than a sporting event. It's them kind of showing themselves to the world that, hey, this can be done. And if they are successful, it's a great sign. If they're not successful, tons of pressure here, really.
Yeah, it really, it's kind of it's a make or break for a lot of us in this whole industry, you know, that especially the little guys like me that put on events, you know, if it kind of goes really, really south, you know, like you said, you know, these commissions follow these events and the doctors do, and you just never know what can happen. So fingers crossed within a week or two, we don't have any clusters, we don't have any cases, and all we have is good fights to watch.
Yeah, and I have a lot of friends and family out east, actually. I know you're broadcasting from the Atlantic, which is why I'm always very happy to support. But yeah, I mean, it seems like there's no cases in PEI, but they have to cancel a pile of events because even though they have no active cases right now, once you start letting people from the mainland on, then who knows? In New Brunswick, they didn't have any cases. Essential workers come in. All of a sudden, they have 2 positive there. So I feel like a lot of people are trying to be cautious. Do you want to have a lobster carnival? Absolutely. Do you want to run Old Home Week? No doubt about it. But even though there's no cases currently right now, you don't know how things are going to open up. I think this weekend, next weekend, will be a huge barometer test because, you know, with the May 2-4 coming up and restrictions being slowly eased back, you're going to have a lot of people going out, maybe going to parties, maybe breaking those 5 people gathering rules. Yeah. If nothing blows up by the end of that, well, then maybe we are heading in the right direction. But if all of a sudden we get back to the same amount of cases that we had before, then it would be a bad case. I mean, I'm like everybody else. You watch the news. One day it says this, one day it says that. You just try to take it day by day. Some news you believe, some news you don't believe. It's up to you to listen to everything you can and make your own opinion. But I'm an optimist. Not just for my own business, not for just my friends like you that are running promotions as well, but I mean the fighters first and foremost. I know a lot of these guys, especially in the Canadian regional scene, the money's not quite there. It's a labor of love, and it's developing yourself to get to that next level. But without that experience, without being able to compete, without being able to shine and get the exposure and develop a record and develop a brand, then there isn't that next level. The UFC is looking for fighters right now. But as far as a regional scene guy goes who might have 3 or 4 fights, how does he gain those additional combat? How does he get that extra experience that's required to jump to that next level? And that's why it's extremely important for everybody to get back business. The promoter needs to make money. The fighter needs to get back training. He needs a real camp. He needs, you know, the TV guys, well, they got to be broadcasting. Like everybody's got to come together to get back to the way it was. And if we have to do these spectatorless shows, I mean, well, then the promoter can't really turn a profit. I mean, that's next to impossible as far as regional scene guys go, not having a live gate. I mean, we're all live gate. Yeah. So there's a lot of moving parts for sure. But ultimately, at least, you know, I have another job, right? Like I work for Fight Network. So
Yep.
even though that there's a quarantine going on like this elsewhere, I got my show at DraftKings, like I'm spread out. I know guys that train full time. And I know it's not as easy as just saying, well, you know what, for the next few months, I'll get a job. There's not a whole lot of places hiring right now.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's just a crazy time.
Yeah, that's very well said. That's another reason why I wanted to have you on. It's nice to hear from a professional's point of view, people actually in the media of our sport, how this is affecting and hear it in a professional way. I can sit out here as a podcast and, a promoter and kind of stuff, but to hear it from somebody who's actually, been doing this for a long, long time, it's scary stuff, man. And like you said, it's very well said. Everybody's kind of got to get back to it, but it's interesting how we will. Every province is going to be different, like it's going to affect our scene quite badly, I think, in the amount of clubs. What about for you, like up in your end?
Well, see, that's actually a great point. So people are always talking about like when are we going to be able to reopen? And I think when, especially the Ontario government, looking at doing it in phases. Well, phase one, we'll open up, the hardware store, and we'll get the nurseries back open, and you can go do some certain things. Some of it's going to be curbside. Then in phase two, we're going to get some restaurants back open. But people aren't talking about gyms first and foremost.
No.
And the difference between a Good Life fitness gym and an MMA gym is it's night and day, right?
Yeah.
Good Life, you can go in, you can sanitize the barbells, you can do some weightlifting, you can use a cardio machine, and then you get out of there. Whereas MMA gyms, jiu-jitsu gyms, any type of martial art for the most part, it's going to be direct contact, right? I mean, especially with grappling. I mean, I know it's going to sound disgusting, but it's the way it is. You're sweating into somebody else's mouth. Like you're exchanging bodily fluids out on the mat, and then that's all the camaraderie of it, and then you leave. So the dynamic of opening up gyms and opening up MMA gyms, it is actually tough. And that's where I actually feel very, very tough is for, again, the athletes need to prepare, but these small business owners, especially gym owners, I mean, that's a tough task. The government hasn't exactly said that they're going to give a ton of support. I mean, people talk about a $10,000 loan and it's just free. That's not the government giving you money. They force you to shut down your business. You don't have an income now, and now they're giving you a loan, which you're going to have to pay back.
Exactly.
As well as you still have to pay rent on your space, and you still have all this, and you have some members who are diehards, and then they're close. And you know what? Not everybody can afford it. I shouldn't say just because you cancel your gym membership, you're not committed to the cause. But you'll have some people that won't cancel, and then you'll have some people that are in an unfortunate case, and they will have to cancel. So for a lot of these gyms, the uncertainty of was, well, when are we going to get back going? And when we do get back going, what's it going to look like? I have a friend of mine, he's in Thailand right now. And Thailand, I mean, I wouldn't say the economy runs on Muay Thai, but it's like a large sector of it is that's their income. These guys have to compete. Yeah. And for them, it's like they're still allowed to go to the gyms. A lot of the Thai fighters, they do just in fact live in the gym. But they're told don't do any clinch work, and you can hit pads. That's about it. Like, how are you supposed to get ready properly for a fight in Lumpini Stadium and you haven't been clinching? Like, I don't know. It's a tough task. So I feel for some of the guys. This UFC this past weekend, everyone looked good. I didn't think there was too many problems, but you can imagine if Fabricio Verdum, everyone's saying, well, why did he not look so good? Why didn't he look so good? You can imagine that it's like this guy was suspended for 2 years, so hasn't fought. Yeah. And now instead of getting the ring rust off, he's got no one to spar with. He's got no one to grapple with. He's got no one to wrestle with. And now he's got to go fight another human being who's got 70 pro fights. All the guy does is fight. Yeah. Again, tough task. So it's tough to prepare, I think.
Yeah, again, well said. And I actually think Fabricio looked pretty good. Again, like you said, he came off a 2-year layoff. They didn't mention much about that, by the way, which I found kind of interesting. They didn't mention too much about why he was suspended, but he did look good after that first round. I think another couple minutes and he might have won that fight.
You know what? Personally, I kind of thought he was going to get the split decision. I could see, I thought he won. I could see some judge saying, well, I thought Olenek won. Olenek won the first round. He come at him. The second round is the toss-up round because Fabricio definitely wins round 3. And that's where it comes down to where judging is so difficult. Do you go with, well, Fabricio took him down. He had back control. He out-grappled him in the second round. Or do you go with, well, Olenek got back up and landed a few short shots. Yeah. And that's just the crazy thing about MMA. You have 3 human beings sitting ringside that your fate is in their hands. And let's say one of these guys is trained karate for 20 years, and one of these guys was a wrestler for 20 years, and one guy did jiu-jitsu for 20 years. Yeah. Well, the guy that does jiu-jitsu, he's giving into the ground exchanges. No question. And the guy that does wrestling, well, he likes takedowns. Oh, you didn't do anything in the takedown, but you got 3 of them. Yeah. And the striker, he doesn't even care for the wrestling or the takedowns. Landed a pretty good shot there. Oh, what a nice kick to the body. It's all different perspective. So in that regard, I thought Fabricio didn't look terrible. I think people were expecting a little bit more out of him. But again, 42 years old. My most impressive thing I thought was Oleinik's ability to just stay alive and scramble on the ground. I mean, this isn't not that long ago. Alexei Oleinik, he grappled Gordon Ryan. Gordon Ryan's 100 pounds smaller than Alexei Oleinik. But again, you just saw wow, there's levels to jiu-jitsu. And Alexei Oleinik is a Sambo stylist. He's got a very good scarf hold. He's got a very good neck crank. He's got the nastiest Ezekiel choke in all of MMA. A move, obviously, not really used in MMA, but he's got old man timey power moves. But how is he going to go against a former world champion, a decorated champion, ADCC competitor like Fabricio Verdum? The fact that he was mounted, the fact that he gave up his back, and the fact that he overcame those armbar attempts, geez, I mean, all props to him. I mean, he came to fight. He put on a performance, and so in that regard, I'm glad he got the win, because boy, oh boy, did he work for it. But with Fabricio, it's just tough seeing somebody, former world champion. He's got wins over Fedor Emelianenko and Cain Velasquez, and now he's struggling mightily to handle Alexei Oleinik. I think that's where, for some people, it was tough to see. But all things considered, I mean, it wasn't the worst performance out there.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into my next point, because I wanted to ask you about, the old versus new guard. Like you always heard, like, I'm 39 years old. You always heard, for me, it was always Rory McDonald. He's the first kid that grew up doing martial arts, and you saw that in the way he fought compared to, people who fought 10 years before him. But now you look at it even more, like how the fight game has changed, insurmountable. But I don't know if it's harder to be a star now too. It seems it's almost like there's so many events that it's become like such a machine that I don't know what I'm trying to get at here, but it's hard to kind of break that mold and really be a star in the UFC, I think.
I think so. I think the UFC as a promoter, I mean, they have a job to do. They are a promoter. They need to promote the athletes. But when you have so many fighters and you have so many athletes, you have 700 guys under contract. At some point, you need to let it up to them. You can't just create a star. You can't just say, Sage Northcutt, he's a star. People like him, but he's got to have the skills to back it up. And therein lies the issue with creating a star. In pro wrestling, you can lose a match. It doesn't matter. You can build a star. You can craft a star through storylines and storytelling. You have a star. In boxing, hard to create a star. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow him to win 30 fights without ever fighting anybody of note. And when he's 30-0, then we'll be able to sell a fight with this undefeated record. Those are their ways of doing it. MMA, it's a very volatile sport. You can have a world champion like Andrei Arlovsky. He's 28-19. The man's lost 19 times. That doesn't take anything away from him. No. We saw Jeremy Stevens this past weekend. It was fun while it lasted. Calvin Kattar getting the win. But with Jeremy Stevens, this man's got 16, 17 pro losses. Losses don't matter so much. But what happens with the public is they want to get behind that little dangling carrot. They want to get behind that gold nugget. So if we look at who are the UFC's biggest stars over the last number of years, we've got Brock Lesnar, by that pro wrestling experience. He had a big following already. We've got Ronda Rousey. She ended up transitioning to pro wrestling. She kind of had that aura behind her. We've got Conor McGregor, hasn't done pro wrestling, could easily do pro wrestling with the transition. But these are all people that are marketing themselves and trying to become a star, and they've got to use that. They got to use their language. They got to use their vocals. They got to use everything they can. Some fans don't like it. Some fans like the pureness of martial arts and the humbleness and the loyalty and all that. But some people don't mind that little bit of shit talking. And so I go back to Colby Covington and George Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal, we'll start with him, right? He's essentially a journeyman opponent. I mean, he's fought 40 times. He's a very, very lethal fighter, but he's never really gotten his credit amongst fans. People know who he is, but you got to be a hardcore fan to know who he is. Colby Covington, he's a very clean-cut kid from Oregon. There's nothing special about him. He's a wrestler. He likes to grind guys down. There's nothing really there. They're both at American Top Team. Now, American Top Team is managed and owned by Dan Lambert. Dan Lambert has a very extensive history in professional wrestling, massive pro wrestling fan, and actually owns a belt collection of classic belts worth $500,000. Guy's all in on pro wrestling. So he talks to Colby Covington, and he gets him to go on this whole, let's go with this MAGA stick. You go with, Donald Trump. You're going to wear the hat. You're going to talk some smack. People are going to hate you, but people are going to tune in. Colby Covington became a star, not the kind of star that Conor McGregor is, not the kind of star that Ronda Rousey is, but in the current landscape of what the UFC has to work with, he's one of their bigger name guys because he's gone on that record and he's talked all that. And then look at Masvidal. Masvidal doesn't have a gimmick. He's fought his entire career. He's that bad. He's a legitimate fighter. He was fighting in backyard bare knuckle boxing contest in Kimbo Slice's backyard. All this guy is fight. There's no gimmick there. Yeah. Why didn't the fans ever resonate him? Because the gimmick wasn't there. But then he knocks out Ben Askren, and that changes everything. Because now Lambert's telling him the same thing. You need to pick a gimmick. He's full Razor Ramon now. He's Tony Montana. He's wearing the Versace jacket, and he's got the Hawaiian shirt, and he's got the sunglasses and the gold chain. And that's where it comes down to, if that's how these guys are marketing themselves. So when you flip side that to Canadian MMA and regional MMA, and who's our next George St. Pierre? For a long time, we all thought it was Rory, right? And Rory had to do it through his performances. I thought Mike Malott was going to be the absolute end-all, be-all. I just thought, what a talented kid, and sky's the limit. But, some injuries and some just bad luck generally along the way kind of took him off from that. And then everybody loves the Laramie brothers, both TJ and Tony. And they just fight the toughest guys available. That it's a difficult way, I wouldn't say to develop, but you might lose a fight here and there, and then it just knocks you back, right? So how does a young guy develop? Well, he can't go and talk smack. He can't come up with a gimmick because he's a nobody right now. You need to use that experience, get those wins, get to the UFC. And then unfortunately, as far as building stars goes, winning's not necessarily enough. Guys like Tony Ferguson have won 12 in a row, and what does it get you? There's other guys that are on massive winning streaks, can't even get a title shot, right? There's no rhyme or reason to who's getting these fights. It's who the fans want to see the most. Greatest martial artist I've seen if I'm saying my Mount Rushmore of greatest martial artists of all time, Demetrius Johnson cannot be defeated by no man. And yet nobody cares because he's 125 pounds, because he's dominating people, because he's not out there talking smack, and he's not creating this brand and this and I don't know, it's sad because he's so supremely talented, but the fans are paying money at the end of the day, and you know how it is on the promoter side of it. You could have a world-class guy and he's not selling any tickets. You could have a guy having his first amateur fight, talks a good game, sold 100 tickets. Man, hard not to give that guy a little exposure, right?
That's at the end of the day, that's exactly, you're right, that's what it's about. Like a promoter is, and I think promoters get a bad rap. I really do. Not all of us are always the old school way of doing things. It's just, I think that, I don't know. I think it's a hard gig to promote, and it's, yourself, I guess you've done it, eh?
Yeah, no, I hear you for sure. I think the perception with fighters, or for promoters, I should say, is two things. Number one, there's that old school mentality of these guys are just using me, and it's a blood sport, and they don't care if I get hurt, where it's complete the opposite is true. But the second big thing that people don't realize is it's very, very, very difficult to turn a profit. So I think a lot of the time people just assume, man, the promoter's making all this money and I only got paid $1,000 for this fight. It's you don't understand. If we paid all these guys what they were worth and what they deserve, there wouldn't be a promotion, right? There'd be no way of making business. So unfortunately, you have to lowball them and offer them a little bit less than that they're valued at, than that they're worth. I wouldn't recommend any human being, and listen, I'll be straight with you, and I've paid guys $300 for a fight. Sure. I feel very, very guilty. I do. But I understand that the promotion won't operate beyond that if you're paying these guys $500,000 each. And for them, it might be their first fight, their second fight. It's the trade-off of, I know I'm not making any money early in my career, but I need to get a 5-0, 6-0, 7-0, 8-2, 10-3 record so that I can jump up to that big show. And when I go to that big show, that's when I'll get paid. The tough part that I have finding and explaining guys is, you might give a guy $300 and then 4 or 5 fights into his career he signs with Bellator and he's on a Bellator undercard and he's only making $1,000. You don't just make the big money right away. A lot of these guys, they'll fight and they'll fight and they'll fight. And Conor McGregor's he's a two-weight world-class world champion in Ireland, in the UK, before coming to the UFC. And he's on social service, right? He's on welfare essentially, because even though he's winning fights in the regional scene, he might be making $20,000, $30,000 a year. And that's just not enough to support somebody and a family and get a house and get a car and all these different things. So I feel like the fighter will look at it like, oh, I'm getting taken advantage of. But the promoter, I know a lot of these guys very personally, we're bending over backwards to just facilitate a show in order to allow them to fight at. And the higher you go up, if you've got a good fighter on your card, you need to fly in an opponent, just because Canada doesn't have a ton of guys in the weight class, and guys don't really want to fight each other because they're trying to protect their records till they get to that higher level. And so you need to fly in a UFC veteran from Indiana, and he wants $6,000. And it just becomes, now you're doing it to help your guy. Well, my guy needs an exposure fight. And so you're spending the money for him. And then you'll read some negative comment where it's like, oh, they set him up. But I don't know. It is a thankless job, man. A very thankless job. And that's why I have mad respect for all the guys that put on shows, the guys that bust their tail for it. Because, people always say there's no shows without fighters. Very true. There's no shows without promoters as well. It's a kind of a back and forth relationship.
Big time. Yeah, they're both, it's a necessary evil for sure. And I think that's one thing that, we're out here, we're kind of doing the whole idea is what we did with Submission Series Pro, like grow the scene back, like start at the root, like the amateur level, and grow it back. And so we're going to really focus on amateurs and building it up from there, you know. And there's lots of really good, great, talented pros out here, but then you have this same situation that you just explained, right? And there's no return on investment necessarily either, because you know they fought 10 times. It's a hard sell sometimes after someone's seen someone fought 10 times locally. So it's a hard thing. Like you say, you're helping from our end, you know, you're working together because you know these people for a long time, and you want to give them an opportunity because you know they deserve an opportunity. And it's super hard, right? So you know, it's
No, I completely agree. And I mean, in your case, you guys go all out to put on the best show possible. And whether it is bringing in a Diego Santos or Rustam Chizaev, right? This one sticks out for me important because this guy's flying under the radar potentially on big name value, but like one of the top guys in the world. Like he's an ADCC competitor currently, and he's coming out to Nova Scotia. He's coming out to pick to put on a show for the fans. So it's like, oh man, that's really awesome to see. But at the same time, that costs money. What I noticed in that, and this actually crushed me. I noticed when you're running those submission series, right? You're putting your heart and soul into it. You're streaming it. You're adding commentary. You're adding all these things. You're doing everything right. And then you'll have a purple belt tournament, right? We're taking all the best purple belts, submission only. We're putting on these cool things. And then you have people messaging you being like, well, am I getting paid? Well, how much am I getting paid? It's like, you're a purple belt, man. You're not a black belt. You haven't made it. I get you're entertaining, and I bet people got to look at it for the exposure side of things. Like, oh, geez, if I go on the show, it's streamed. And you know what? These guys are working out a deal with Fight Network or Fight Pass, or there's going to be additional eyeballs on me, and I'm going to go grab someone. And then, you know, you're getting the experience. That's first and foremost, but you're building that image. You're getting a little bit of exposure. And you might have somebody that gives you an interview afterwards. You might have somebody that reaches out, and then you've got more things that you can put on your social media. Hey, guys, competed this past weekend. That builds your following on social media. You got to get out there in order to do all that. But people are more, well, I want $100 or I want $200. And that might be what stands them back. And that's where, as much as I didn't ever like paying guys small amounts of money, the one trade-off here is, hey, go out there, do your thing, and move on to the next one. We'll get you a couple. And I know it doesn't seem financially sound and reasonable, but, you know, to be a combat sports athlete, you have to be an optimist. You know, if you're a pessimist, you're not fighting a human being in a cage. If you're a realist, you're not fighting a human being in the cage. If you're an optimist, it's like, I'm going to beat this guy and move on. That's the attitude you need. And so a lot of the times it's like they're betting on themselves realistically. Yeah,
and it's such an admirable quality, right? Because I look at it from my end, and again, we talk about promoter, blah, 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 but like, you know, say 6 months of work for one event, you know, and you break even and you're like, awesome, right? Like that's a success, right? But I think like there's so many aspects that go into this shit, man, and it's an incredible emotional journey for anybody, fighter or not. And to see somebody like to go in there and succeed, you know, and win and meet that goal, right, is a pretty powerful thing to be part of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We had a show one time, and once it's all said and done, I put on like 15 pounds, just sleep, like you're not sleeping properly. And then, oh, geez, I got this call, and then I got to talk to this guy, and this guy's blood work's wonky. I got to call his doctor and figure it out. Like, as far as like people just say, oh, there's a promoter and there's a matchmaker, but it's like there's a lot that goes on. You got to keep on top of these guys, even something as small as we'll figure out what song they want to come out to. But there's 24 guys in the card. It's babysitting one person is tough. Babysitting 24 people. I'm not saying babysitting, they're full grown men. I'm saying you got to chase a guy down for his medicals, and you got to chase a guy down for his song. It's just so much goes into it. So we have this show, and once it's all said and done, we're sitting in the back room, we're crunching numbers, and it's like we lost $2,000. And everybody is elated because you could lose so much more. We're happy because it's like, man, it wasn't that big of a loss. Maybe we can recoup it down the line. Maybe we got a couple sponsors that haven't paid up yet. That's the other thing. You're chasing sponsors around. You're doing all these different things, right? Maybe we can get to a break even, and that's cool. And then when I looked back at it, 3 guys on that card ended up going to the UFC down the road. And so to me, that means something in that we gave these guys a platform, and a lot of these guys came and fought. We had a guy fight for free, and he made it to the UFC. I won't drop his name just because I don't think it's fair to him. But he willingly said, bring me in an opponent, give him my purse, because I know I need a big win to get to that next level. And so he was willing to pay to bring in a very tough opponent, gets the win, and then eventually down the line made it to the UFC. Didn't do great in the UFC, but all the same, that was his dream. That's what he wanted to do. And it was cool to be able to facilitate that by getting a fight. But yeah, it doesn't. I feel terrible seeing a guy going hard 15 minutes knowing like all he got out of it was a great memory, and the hope that I hope the UFC sees this and I can put it on my reel, or I can put some highlights up and I can get a call. So that's always difficult to see. But again, yeah, like you said, I mean, we lost a slight bit of money, and we're still happy because we were able to give this platform. Meanwhile, I could see someone on the card feeling slighted and seeing like, geez, these guys gave me $300 and it looked like the place was half sold out, 3/4 sold out. It's like, man, we needed the place all the way sold out so that we could have made a few bucks.
Yeah.
So being 80% capacity actually led us to losing a few bucks. And that's where not everything's full transparency. But as the promoter, it's like we know the risk, just like the fighter knows the risk. And I'm not a fighter. I don't have what they have. Like you said, it's something to admire, really, the characteristics of someone that goes out there, especially for someone with their livelihood, not just someone fighting outside of a 7-Eleven. Like, it's for someone to just be like, this is what I do day in and day out. It's tough and it's a sacrifice. And there's so many things that go into it that no one would ever know. But to defend the promoters and the guys the matchmakers and the guys that are putting their time in, like, I understand that there's a ton of sacrifices that go into there. It's just, your body per se is not one of those things you're sacrificing. Whereas the athlete he's putting it on the line.
Yeah, that's well said. It's very, very true. It's a scary business, and I have the utmost respect for any man or woman or child in certain parts of the world that may get into a cage and fight. So,
Russia, baby.
Yeah, that's it, right? I wasn't dropping names or anything. I was just saying. What's the old Canadian scene? Obviously we jumped in there last year or this year, I guess. It feels like I've been in quarantine for about 1.5 years, but what's the Canadian scene? Are you happy with it? Do you feel like it's, there's some really good promotions kind of out there across the country?
Yeah, I agree. I think that Canada's doing a pretty good job of stepping up. For me personally, because I'm an Ontario boy, that was the biggest thing for a long time, is that we don't have pro MMA currently here. We can't even do amateur MMA here. So how are these guys supposed to get their experience? And what happens is you got to go to Michigan, and you got to go to Alberta, and you got to go to other places where you're not getting that hometown fight. You're not having them fight in your backyard. You're always the B-side. You're being brought in to lose. No promoter from the States brings in a Canadian guy to beat his local guy. No, because the Canadian guy didn't sell any tickets. Let's be real. He might have a few friends go down with him, but the American guy's local. He sold tickets. His friends are going to have beers here. They're going to hang out. They would ideally, nothing's a setup, nothing's ever a fix, but ideally you would want that hometown guy to get the win. So that's what I felt with the Ontario guys for a long time. They just didn't have that outlet. And for Canada, for the most part, a lot of them didn't have that outlet. I know with out east, it's like, okay, we got Elite One MMA, and they may have a handful of shows a year. They're a promotion that's been around for a very long time. But again, I mean, there's not a huge talent pool, and you can't be flying in people. And so for you guys to prop up, and there's another organization for Ontario, geez, we got Provincial FC, the PFC guys, and they put on a world-class show. And then the BTC guys, I don't really know what you would call it, Burlington Training Center MMA. Like I think it's just BTC MMA. That one I don't fully understand, but a great show. Very well-run show. Rob Beaver's doing a terrific job there. And so you need two very solid regional promotions in Ontario. It's like you see them building out. I know Modern FC propped up in Saskatchewan. Manitoba tries to get some fights going the odd time. Alberta's obviously a very good hotbed. BC with BFL, number of other shows there. Sunny Serene co-promoting around. I think that the scene is getting there. It's developing. It's giving a lot of these guys outlets and opportunities to compete. Whereas it now is like we just need to produce that next level of talent. Canada's always produced good fighters. We've always produced, UFC level quality caliber of talent. I believe it's where's that next world champion coming from? We had George. George was awesome. Prior to George, we had Carlos Newton. So I mean that welterweight title was for us for a long time. But we wanted Rory to continue that trend. Maybe things didn't work out there. And then when you look at the rest of Canada, for example, we get behind a Brad Katona. We want to see a Brad Katona do well. And then poor matchmaking results in him losing a couple of close decisions where he's mostly just getting wrestled against. And he's released from the promotion. And then he's, we have guys like Gavin Tucker. No one wanted to fight Gavin Tucker. I mean, literally, the Newfoundland Terror, nobody's going near this guy. So for a long time, he's fighting once a year, and it's not his choice. It's just there's nobody available. Now you make it to the UFC, and you go from not being able to fight very often to they want you to fight a few times a year against the best guys. It's just a large gap, I think, to jump. So when I look at the promotions in Canada, I think we're very healthy. When I look at the fighters in Canada, I think we're very healthy. I'm trying to think who's that next guy that's going to jump up. Who's that next guy that's not only just going to get signed to the UFC, because getting signed to the UFC is a massive accomplishment in itself.
Huge.
but Kyle Prepelic is an extremely talented fighter, and he gets to the UFC, and it's no knock against him. It's just now there's just very, very good guys in the UFC. So again, I'm thinking, who's that next guy that jumps up and really makes a sting? And I think myself, amongst a lot of people, believe that the Laramie brothers could be just that. I mean, they train very hard. They're good kids. They're smart kids. I think sky's the limit for them. But this sport's more than just skill and dedication. I mean, you need a lot of luck. You need a lot of variables. You need to avoid injuries. You just need so much else. And they're both very young. So there's a long road ahead of them, so to speak. But I get excited seeing, and you know what? It's like anything. You watch, you say, oh, geez, we don't have that many prospects. And then 3 months from now, you watch a show, you go, Jesus, those two kids look awesome. Yeah. And then 6 months later, you're like, the sport just evolves and changes, and people prop up, and this guy's good and that guy's awesome. But Robin Black, I'll steal a line from Robin Black. I said TJ Laramie, and I'm on Tony now. I think Tony's the real deal, and TJ's still awesome. But just the TJ, speaking of him, his coach Reno Belcastro said this kid's a scary talent. Never seen nothing like him. Like, this he's a very, very good talent. He'll go on to do great things. And I believe that could absolutely be true. And I talked to Robin about it, and Robin says that all that statement is very true. But the thing now is the sport has just evolved so much that there's a guy in New Mexico who's got a kid who's special, man. And there's a kid in San Diego, he's special, man. And there's 2 kids in Brazil, they're special, man. And there's half a dozen kids in Russia. It's not like it used to be back in the day. It's like, oh, this guy's a Taekwondo fighter and he's taking on a guy that wrestled a little in college. It's like everyone's so well-rounded. Everyone's got so many skills that who breaks through? Who really is the real deal? The only way to find out is they got to square off against each other. And that's where I give TJ and Tony props. They're fighting UFC quality guys right now on the regional scene. So when they do get to the UFC, I think they'll be closer to as adjusted as you need to be. And I'm hopeful that they'll both make serious runs eventually.
Very well said. It's I think, like you said, it's important. You need to have that experience. If you can't fight cans all the way and then expect to go to the UFC and then fight, jump in there and fight a top 20 in the world, like, you have to have good fights. And I think that's where matchmaking comes in. It's very important too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the matchmaker's responsibility to see where these guys are at. You don't want just routes where, I'll have the hometown favorite who sold tickets, just smash this guy in 30 seconds, because you're not doing him any favors. And you need to grow these guys along so that eventually they're ready for that big dance. And to use an example that obviously is familiar to maybe some of your fans out east, but Christian Savoy could be a very talented fighter. Unfortunately, Christian Savoy's fought a lot of lower end fighters, so to speak. Not saying anything against his quality of competition, but it would be a stretch to now say, well, I'm fighting in the UFC against some of the best guys in the world. Him fighting Pat Carroll, I got a lot of respect for Pat Carroll. I think he's a very tough guy. Actually used to work security at the lumber mill where my girlfriend's dad works. But Pat's a great guy. He actually spent a lot of time in Las Vegas, and talking to my contacts in Vegas, I mean, him being with Gavin and all them, they think this kid's a very talented fighter as well. Him versus Savoy is in New Brunswick. Could have gone either way. I think you give it to Savoy because you were in New Brunswick. If the fight takes place in Nova Scotia, maybe it goes for Carroll. I don't know. It was a good fight. Those are the kind of fights you're going to need 4 or 5 of those before all of a sudden you're in the UFC fighting a UFC middleweight on the prelims of a big card. It's a big talent jump. And again, he's 7-0, and it looks good, and he looks like he's a skilled fighter. But with the Contender Series, I know he never fought in the Contender Series, but he was supposed to. If you would have gotten the contract, now you're fighting in the UFC. Now you're fighting guys that maybe have got a little more experience than you, maybe that edge. It's nice to fight 3 or 4 times on a Contender Series level before jumping up. And that's where shows such as your show and some of the other shows, that's why you have to now bring in them tougher opponents. But he's got to sell twice as many tickets to value the bringing in an opponent. And now it's tough. He wants to train. He wants to get ready for a fight. He doesn't want to sell tickets all day. But he has to get the opponent. So it is very much a business at this level till you break out to that level, to the upper echelons. And when you do break up to the upper echelons, you got to make sure you're preparing, because it's a lot harder getting back into the UFC once they cut you than it is getting your first contract. So you got to be prepared. Yeah,
they say that. They say that's very true. Once you're out, it's hard to get back in. But yeah, Christian,
like 7 in a row.
Yeah, exactly. Christian, he's a guy out here that's he's definitely one of the best out here. So it'd be interesting to see. I know he was I think he was supposed to fight Jordan Williams, I believe, in the Contender Series, and then I don't know what happened.
Yeah, and it would have been a good fight, I think.
Yeah, I know he's training. He's splitting his time. He is training out there with Duke Rufus, out of Rufus Sport, which is good. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with Christian. I've had him grapple. He's grappled a couple of our tournaments and stuff, and he's very talented on the ground. I've never seen him get to use his jiu-jitsu, which should be interesting if he ever gets to use it, But yeah, we'll see. I got to ask you, man, how'd you get into this whole racket we'll call combat sports?
Yeah, so I'm sure it's a long story, but I don't know. When I was a kid, just I was into hockey and was into other sports, just like most kids growing up.
Yeah.
And I found myself watching hockey games and just waiting for them to drop the gloves. Like I just wanted them to fight.
Nice.
And my favorite player at the time was Matthew Barnaby. Matthew Barnaby wasn't all that skilled. He had a 20-goal season with Buffalo one time.
Yeah.
He really wasn't all that skilled.
Yeah.
To hear him tell it, he's like, man, I got cut from my junior B team 3 times. He's like,
Wow.
and then one time I was so frustrated, I just started fighting guys on the ice at practice. And the coach was like, kid's got some scrap to him. And then all of a sudden he gets a job. And now all of a sudden he's got to fight. And all of a sudden he's in the NHL. Gee, I got to fight some more. And he's fighting guys that are huge, bigger than him. He becomes the first pest. There's been pests since him. Guys like Brad Marchand have really – he's the next level pest. He can score and he can get under your skin. But like Barnaby wasn't a huge goal scorer. He needed to get right under your skin. I like guys like that. I'd like to see the fight. That was kind of what was interesting to me. So now I get into high school and it's like grade 10 – like grade 9, grade 10, and Kimbo Slice is just dicing people off in the streets. It's 2006. He's popular. YouTube's kind of in its infancy, right? So you can go on YouTube, but like, what are you looking at?
Yeah.
It's not like recommended videos where it's like, I've stolen all your data over the last 3 years. I know you're gonna like this video. Oh man, I do like this video. No data collection at the time. You just got to punch in the keyword of what you're looking for. So it's like, well, let's look for fights. But no one's ripping torrents. No one's putting UFC stuff. No one's putting like that for the most part. There was a little bit here and there. Yeah. It was mostly just like, oh, well, let's just film people fighting like World Star Hip Hop style stuff. And Kimbo was the man. Kimbo's going out there and he's smoking guys. And then through that whole process there, it's like you'd see Ultimate Fighter 1 came out. I'm not one of those guys that claimed I watched it from start to finish. I didn't even watch the fight live. I watched it like a month or two after Forrest Griffin versus Bonner is when it came on my radar. But beyond that, it was Tito and Chuck, right? Tito and Chuck had mainstream exposure at the time, right? They would do little cameos in movies, right? Like Cradle to the Grave, motherfucker Jet Li. It's like they're in the cage, right? You'd see little spots. You would see certain things like that. My mom watched Friends. Tank Abbott was on an episode of Friends, like it was like little cultural spots here and there. And then when Tito and Chuck agreed to fight the second time, by then it was just like, we got to buy this pay-per-view. Fighting's awesome. We got to watch this. It's the best. And so we watched that and every Ultimate Fighter since, and then it just snowballed effect. And then the IFL was huge because my dad works nights. He's always worked nights. He races horses, so his day would go from like 6 at night till 1 in the morning. And my mom, she's ran a daycare. And so me and my brother, we'd wake up early in the morning, 6 in the morning. My dad's asleep. He was up till 1 in the morning. He's asleep. So now I go to school. I don't see my dad. Yeah. I get back from school and I get back for like a few hours. We hang out for an hour or two. He's got to go to work for 6. I'm home at like 4 or 5. He's got to go at 6. So we would watch IFL together. When that 2006, we had an hour or two to watch. They were on Fox Sports Network. IFL was technically the first ever MMA organization on national television. They would run tape delay shows, and they had Roy Nelson, and they had Ben Rothwell, and they had Tim Kennedy, and they would do legend fights. They had Jens Pulver, Pat Miletich, Renzo Gracie, Carlos Newton. Toronto had a team there of fighters like Wagner Fabiano. It was tremendous, and it was like time I spent with my dad, so I valued the time, and it was also the sport that I was coincidentally really getting into at the time, and I just felt like this is where I'm supposed to be. And then talking to people in the family, like we're combat sports fans. My dad was a boxing fan. My great grandfather drove from Sudbury, Ontario to New York, Madison Square Garden to watch Joe Louis fight. And he was a little bit late. And by the time they got to the stands, Joe Louis knocked him out, 3rd round KO. So the drove by the way for nothing. But it's who we are. It runs deep in our blood. And I've always said, I'm like, once Caveman 1 saw Caveman 2 across the way, he was like, I could beat this guy and take his cave, right? Like it runs so deep into your blood. And I say the same thing with horse racing. Once Caveman 1 got on a horse, Caveman 2 got on a horse. I bet you I can run this horse fast. Like, I bet you I can go faster. Faster, bigger, faster, stronger. That's who humans are at the core. And if you're a tech guy, you want to build bigger, faster, stronger. You want to build bigger. Building's always got to get bigger. Technology's always got to get faster. It's like that fascination. Gladiators used to fight. Pancration. It's all there. But we've learned more about human hand-to-hand combat in the last 20 years than the prior 1 billion. Like however long the planet's been around, we know more about what actually works and doesn't work in an actual fight now. And that's just tremendous. They're learning stuff every day. They're picking up new tricks every day. I watch fights all the time where I think to myself, that was a sweet little move. Why haven't I thought about that? Why isn't anybody else doing that? And then 2 months from now, everyone's doing it. Travis Brown knocks out one guy with elbows from that double leg against the cage. And now it's just a go-to move people do. Anderson Silva snaps one guy's head back, Vitor, with the front kick. Now it's a go-to move. You see stuff and you add it to your game and you evolve and you adjust. And it's the most beautiful sport out there, man. One-on-one, you can't blame anybody. You can't be like, wow, my point guard was a little off today. My goalie let in just a couple of cheesy goals. It's on you, man.
Yeah.
You put in the work, you reap the benefit. And to me, like, how could you not get behind that? So it's been like 14, 15 years now, and I love it. I've heard people say, very cliche saying, never worked a day in my life. I have. But I get the saying. If you're doing something that you like, it's a lot more bearable than laying brick. Because even though brick needs to be laid, a better man than me is going to do it. It's not who I am. I couldn't. Yeah. This is who I am. I love it. And if I can support these guys and help them in any way, by all means, we all got a purpose, and this is mine. This is my calling, right?
Yeah, I agree, man. I couldn't agree more. And it's some of us are suckers for sure. We're stuck around this game, but that brings me to my last important question, I guess we'll say. Again, we've spoke for a long time. We've been doing these events for a long time. I know there's a lot of talented fighters out here on the East Coast that would love an opportunity to get on the Fight Network. What are the chances of us possibly talking about that, or how does someone get their footage on the Fight Network?
Yeah, absolutely. Fight Network, first and foremost, they've got a platform that's very much, we want to reach out, we want to help the fighters, whatever way possible. So if you've got an event and you want to get on the Fight Network, again, this is the one thing, because I have dealt with some people in the past where it's like, okay, we'd love to get on the Fight Network. Okay, perfect. And then like, okay, well, could Fight Network pay the production cost to have the events? Like, Fight Network's not going to pay the production cost to have this event, because production could be, for appropriate production that you would want, you're going to spend 15, 20. I've seen people spend upwards of $20,000 for production. Sure. Then people will say, okay, well, I could get it produced. It'll be a little bit cheaper, no problem. Well, but I want to have it live on the Fight Network. Well, now you need a video truck. Now you need someone that's going to take that satellite feed and broadcast that. So again, you need the video truck. It's going to be more money. Okay, well, what if, we'll do it on tape delay and I'll film it myself. But it's like, man, you need color commentary. You need graphics. You need a tail of the tape. You need between round stuff. Like, we've done events from Germany or Hungary that, they didn't have highlights in between, and that's fine. A lot of stuff gets cut because you got to go to commercial break. Obviously, it's a package show, but if promoters are willing to spend the money and put on a nice show, and they now want to show that to the world, and they want to get that additional exposure, increase the awareness for their fighters, then by all means, Fight Network, that's what we're here for. We want to help out. It's the same way we used to send a lot of, teams to go and do interviews with local fighters. The problem is because we're Ontario based and we cover all the fighters all over. But for the most part, if there is that keen awareness on Canadian fighters, it's very unfair to be doing features on Ontario guys all the time and interviews with Ontario guys all the time. Yeah. Where you're right, there's very talented fighters out east, there's very talented fighters out west, there's very talented fighters throughout the whole country, and we want the whole country to watch Fight Network. We don't want them just watching Ontario fighters all the time. So it's important to have events from Ontario and events from BC and events from Alberta and events from out east. And I see that you're stepping out. I wouldn't say filling that void, because again, Elite, I can't take anything from them.
No,
they've done a great job.
Great work, yeah.
To have one company bear the load for a long time, it's difficult. You need different outlets. And also, these guys also need a secondary place to go perform as well. Yeah. What happens if, the promoter didn't like the fight and he now says, well, I'm not going to give you a fight. Well, now they have nowhere to go. You need to be able to go around from different places and compete more than once or twice a year. And so I fully understand that. But again, yeah, with Fight Network, we want to expose these fighters. We want to show them. We want to show them off and create the next level. It's a great thing for everybody. On one hand, these fighters get more exposure, then when they make it onto that next level, hey, I used to watch these guys on Fight Network.
That's it.
And I know that stuff works, man. Because again, and everything it was a house of cards. Like everything just fell on my lap almost. But IFL launches in 2006. Kimbo's career takes off around 2006. Chuck and Tito are getting ready to dance in 2006. Fight Network launches 2005. Soft launch 2005. They give free preview away in 2006. I just sat there and watched reruns of nothing. It was Ultimate Combat Experience. It's a show from Utah. They did a show every single week in a bar in Utah. A couple decent guys fought there. Rico Rodriguez, DeMarcus Johnson, Jeremy Horn, Brawley Oddstreet. A lot of good guys. A lot of Utah regional scene guys. But why was me, 16-year-old kid, watching guys from Utah fight in a bar once a week? Because it's like you're seeing it. And I like the combat. And now I remember the names. And now all of a sudden, Casey Bustafatty Beckstead. And James the Bird Dog Birdsley. This is 14 years ago. I remember all these guys like it was yesterday. I loved it. It was great. It didn't matter if you're a first fight guy or a 10th fight guy. It's like you watch the journey, the progression. And I think showing Regional Show MMA allows you to now hopefully someday tune into the UFC and say, geez, I remember that guy. He was fighting on the regional scene back in the day. He was on Fight League Atlantic. Oh, I remember that. Oh, now you have a video library and you've got 3 or 4 fights with this guy. Now your video library is worth something and you can go sell that to anybody. The UFC might want it. Who knows? But they say, oh, geez, we're going to promote this kid, and he's got 6 fights that we don't have access to, and this promoter does. They'll buy it off of you, or certainly they'll rent it from you, or they'll lease it from you, whatever they need to do to promote their guy. So, of course, getting more eyeballs is very important. And I've been following you guys for a long time. I know you sent some of your submission grappling stuff over in the past. And the fact that you bring in a Jimmy Smith, the fact that you bring in world-class competitors and people, and I know this is – again, this is your 49th podcast. I was hoping to be on number 50.
I was,
but just we
dropped the ball. We missed one. I'm sorry.
All good. But I see you putting in the work, and I see you getting the reps. And no doubt about it, the shows are always a little bit smoother. And you always learn something. Just in life, you're always picking up, you know what? I wish I could have done that differently. I would have done this differently. I have no doubt about it that you're going to produce a quality show, and we will be honored to carry that on. So definitely send me over the footage. I'd love to go through it. And if you need any notes or anything like that, we'd be happy to. But again, Kat, honestly, you've done a lot for the sport and throughout the country, certainly in your province. And I want to support you as well, because personally, I do feel that you're a guy that put your neck on the line for a lot of people. You've busted your ass for a lot of people. And I want to see someone have your back as well and be like, man, this guy is busting his ass. What can I do to ensure that nothing happens? How can I ensure this thing keeps going and provides all this opportunities for these people? And, especially Churro, with all the crazy things that are happening in Churro, it's like, how much do these guys want to have an event to come back to months down the road? Well, it's support. And that's what I'm here for. So whatever you need, man, I'll be there to help you out.
There you go. Well, that's almost speechless. That's very kind words, and it's very true. I definitely have worked my ass off, and I don't say it too often, but I appreciate the kind words. And it's obviously a team effort for years and years and years. So many people behind the scenes, but you and I've spoke forever, man, and it's people like you who give advice on how you should do this, and how you look up to people in the sport in various different ways, whether it's athletes, promoters, journalists, people in news, whatever, and you make these friendships, and it's a wonderful thing, man. So I'm honored to have you on. Finally, it's been years in the making to actually chat and have you on, and I think it's incredible advice that you've given us and a lot of the athletes here in the East Coast. And if there's any final words you want to drop us here, man, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, I appreciate everything you do, and thanks for having me on the show. I hope that we can do it again soon, obviously. And yeah, again, with the East Coast, I got nothing but love for the guys on the East Coast, and I fully understand that just like most things, they haven't really had the proper acknowledgement, the proper exposure. But just look at, say, hockey, for example. If Team Canada was broken up into a Team Alberta, a Team Ontario, a Team Quebec, a Team out East, it's like there's valuable parts from all of them. Our goalies come from Quebec. They got the best goalies. Our pure goal scorers, they all come from out East. Your rugged defenseman, he's coming from Alberta. I like to say Ontario produces the playmaking centerman. But all jokes aside, it's like everybody produces something. The East Coast has always produced high level talent, any sport. And I'm huge into horse racing. Believe me, all the best horsemen that are down in Ontario, guys that came from Cape Breton, Newfoundland, PEI, New Brunswick. So I know that the talent's there. And that's why I'm very appreciative that you're giving the guys a platform. And I just can't wait to see what's on the horizon. So please, Lord, once this coronavirus thing goes away, the human race will outright win, because we always do. It's taking some time. Things will get back to normal. And when they do, I'm just excited to see everybody get back at it. So much love to everybody watching, and all the respect. And I'm hopeful for better days in the future, my friend.
I agree. Again, well said. Great words from a wise man up in Ontario. Make sure you give him a follow on Twitter, folks. Cody Saftic, producer from the Fight Network, a great guy, great friend of the promotion. And this won't be the last time. I'm sure you'll join us, Cody, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Can't wait. Best of luck, man.
All right. Thanks for the kind words. Cody Saftic, folks. All right. That was fantastic. What a great guy. Great insight. It's very important to get that insight from, a local level. We don't get to deal with, you have UFC Fight Pass that we've spoken to, but I've been speaking with Cody for many, many years, and it would be an absolute honor to finally get our Fight League Atlantic, to get that video up, and so people can watch that. And our athletes, it'd be pretty cool to experience that. If you can get your fight on Fight League Atlantic, if you can get that on the Fight Network, it'd be a pretty cool experience for a lot of amateurs out there. So we'll see what we can make work. Again, thanks to our sponsors here, folks, Conway Customs and Privateers Harley Davidson. Make sure you give them a shout out. Make sure you give them a check online. And I've had an absolutely long ass day, folks. The words are not coming out properly today. It's been a stressful day, to say the least, but we got it done. We got episode 49 done. It's in the books. We'll tune in tomorrow night, folks. We got a big one, episode 50. Again, I'd like to thank Cody for joining us. Episode 50, we got Chris Lieben, the Crippler, joining us. Chris Lieben, as well, Lowell Campbell from the band Winter Sleep, and Sean Conahan from the Uptalk PTSD podcast. So we'll chat with all them starting tomorrow night at 6:30. If you can be anything in this world, folks, be kind.